January 17th, 1945. Houffalize, Belgium. 3:47 a.m. The snow fell in silence across the Ardennes forest, each flake dissolving into the blackened earth where fire had consumed everything hours before. Oberleutnant Klaus Hartmann crouched behind the shattered remains of his Panther tank, its turret twisted at an unnatural angle, smoke still rising from the engine compartment. His breath came in ragged clouds. Through the darkness, he heard them, not one engine, not five, but dozens, a mechanical chorus that seemed to have no end. The rumble grew louder, closer, until the tree line erupted with movement. Sherman tanks, another wave, the third that night. Hartmann pressed his frostbitten hands against his face and whispered words his training had never prepared him to say. They just keep coming. This was not how the war was supposed to end for men like Klaus Hartmann. He had joined the Panzertruppen in 1940 when German armor ruled Europe with technological supremacy and tactical genius. He had rolled through France in a Panzer IV, watching French tanks burn before they could even acquire a target. He had advanced into the Soviet Union, believing in the invincibility of German engineering, in the myth that one Tiger could destroy 10 enemy tanks. The mathematics of warfare, as taught in every German military academy, favored quality over quantity. Superior design, superior training, superior will. But mathematics, Hartmann now understood, could be drowned in production numbers so vast they rewrote the very logic of industrial warfare. The Sherman tank was never supposed to win. By every technical measurement that mattered to German engineers, it was inferior. Its 75mm gun could barely penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther at combat range. Its armor plating was thinner, its design simpler, its performance on paper unremarkable. German tankers had coined a bitter nickname for it, the Ronson, after the American cigarette lighter, because it lit up on the first strike. In the hedgerows of Normandy, in the forests of the Hürtgen, German tank commanders had watched Shermans brew up in flames with a single, well-placed shot from a Tiger or Panther. They had celebrated these small victories, tallied their kill ratios, and reported to their superiors that American armor was no match for German steel. But what they failed to understand, what no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome, was that America was not trying to build a better tank. America was building 50,000 of them, 50,000. The number itself seemed impossible. Hauptmann Werner Stolz, a veteran tank commander who had fought from Kursk to the Rhine, would later describe the moment he first heard this figure in a prisoner interrogation. "I thought the American officer was lying," he wrote in his memoir. "I told him our intelligence estimated perhaps 10,000, maybe 15 at most." He laughed. Not with cruelty, but with something worse, pity. He said, "We built 49,000 by the end of last year. We're adding thousands more every month." I felt something inside me break. Not fear, not anger, just the cold realization that we had been fighting arithmetic with ideology. The industrial foundation of this arithmetic had been laid years before the first Sherman ever reached a battlefield. In 1940, while German factories celebrated the production of their 2000th Panzer, American industrial planners were quietly transforming civilian manufacturing infrastructure into the largest military production apparatus in human history. The Detroit Arsenal tank plant, constructed in just 7 months in 1940, stretched across 113 acres and employed over 4,000 workers operating in shifts that never stopped. The Fisher Body Plant, the Chrysler Detroit Arsenal, the Pacific Car and Foundry Company, these facilities didn't just produce tanks, they mass-produced them with the same assembly line efficiency that had revolutionized the automobile industry. By 1943, a Sherman tank rolled off an American assembly line every 60 minutes. By 1944, the production time had been reduced to 45 minutes. The Germans, by contrast, were still crafting each Tiger and Panther with artisanal precision, requiring hundreds of man-hours per vehicle and specialized components that could not be easily replaced. Lieutenant Friedrich Weber encountered this reality on the mud-soaked roads outside Aachen in October 1944. His Tiger tank, a magnificent 56-ton fortress of Krupp steel and engineering excellence, had destroyed 4 Shermans in a single engagement. He had watched them burn and felt the old pride return, the certainty that German quality would prevail. Then the 5th Sherman appeared, and the 6th, and the 7th. They came at us like a storm, Weber recalled. We would destroy one, reload, acquire a new target, fire again. My crew was performing perfectly, but for every Sherman we knocked out, 2 more appeared, then 3 more, then 5. My gunner looked at me with exhausted eyes and asked a question no German tanker should ever have to ask. When do they run out? The answer, Weber learned as his Tiger finally succumbed to mechanical failure after 16 hours of continuous combat, was never. They never ran out. This abundance was not merely numerical, it represented a philosophical divide that German military doctrine could not bridge. German tank design prioritized survivability of the individual crew and vehicle. A Tiger tank was expected to last, to be repaired, to return to battle. Its loss was a tragedy, a significant tactical setback. But American doctrine accepted loss as inevitable, even planned for it. Shermans were designed to be replaced. Their mechanical simplicity meant they could be repaired in the field by crews with basic training. Their standardized parts meant a disabled Sherman could be cannibalized to restore 3 others to operation. When a Sherman was destroyed, another would arrive within days, sometimes hours. This was not recklessness, it was industrial philosophy weaponized. American tank crews understood their role in a system where material abundance compensated for individual vulnerability. They were not expected to survive indefinitely in a single tank. They were expected to advance, and if they fell, the tank behind them would continue forward. The psychological impact of this reality broke German tank crews in ways that direct combat never could. Obergefreiter Hans Becker, a Panther driver captured during the Bulge offensive, described the deterioration of morale in his unit during interrogation by American intelligence officers. In Russia, we feared the T-34 because of its numbers, but we could see the Soviet supply lines struggling, see their formations lose cohesion. Against the Americans, there was no weakness to exploit. Every morning, our officers would brief us on enemy positions, and every morning, there were more American tanks than the day before. We destroyed them. We ambushed them. We fought brilliantly, and still they came. Some men in my unit began to believe the Americans had invented a way to manufacture tanks overnight like bread. One man insisted he had destroyed the same Sherman twice, same markings, same commander visible in the hatch, as if the Americans could resurrect their dead machines. They could not resurrect them, they simply replaced them. And therein lay the symbolic power that transcended mere military logistics. Each Sherman that rolled through a shattered German defensive line carried within it the evidence of a system that German ideology had convinced itself could not exist. National Socialism had taught that democratic societies were weak, decadent, incapable of the collective sacrifice necessary for total war. The presence of 50,000 Shermans, each one a product of factories where workers clocked 8-hour shifts, earned union wages and returned to homes with electricity and running water, testified to a different truth. Industrial abundance did not require tyranny. Democratic capitalism, that supposedly soft and individualistic system, had generated a material surplus so vast it could afford to lose thousands of tanks and simply build more. The recurring sound that haunted German tank crews was not the Sherman's gun, it was the engine. The distinctive rumble of the Wright R975 radial engine, or the Ford GAA V8, multiplied by dozens of vehicles, became the auditory signature of inevitability. Feldwebel Otto Kraus, who commanded a Jagdpanzer Y4 during the defense of Cologne, later described lying in a cellar as American armor entered the city. I heard them for hours before I saw them. The sound was constant, overlapping, like waves on a shore that never recedes. Even with my hands over my ears, I could feel it through the floor. I realized that this sound existed somewhere in America, in those factories the prisoners told us about, and it had never stopped, not for holidays, not for night. While we slept, while we celebrated our small victories, that sound was building the instrument of our defeat. By March 1945, German tank crews had developed a grim pragmatism about their situation. They no longer spoke of victory or superior technology. They spoke of mathematics. Lieutenant Joachim Steiner, commanding one of the last operational Panthers in the Ruhr pocket, explained it to his crew with brutal simplicity. We can destroy 10 of them, maybe 15 if we have good positions and God favors us, but they will send 20. And when we have exhausted our ammunition destroying those 20, they will send 30 more. We are not fighting American tankers, we are fighting American factories, and factories do not feel fear, do not retreat, do not negotiate. The final irony emerged in the testimonies of German prisoners who were transported through American supply depots on their way to POW camps. Oberst Heinrich Vogel, a Panzer Regiment commander, described being marched past a staging area in France where hundreds of Shermans sat waiting for transport to the front. They stretched farther than I could see, row after row, freshly painted, perfectly maintained. American soldiers walked between them casually, eating, smoking, as if these instruments of war were no more remarkable than automobiles in a parking lot. One American guard, seeing my expression, said something to me in English. A translator told me, he said, "This is just one depot, there are 40 more like it." I had spent 3 years believing we could win through superior skill and courage. In that moment I understood we had been fighting a nation that could lose 100 tanks and feel nothing, that could see 100 of our panzers burn and call it a successful Tuesday. The Sherman tank, crude by German standards, simple in design, unremarkable in individual performance, became the steel embodiment of American industrial democracy. It proved that abundance itself was a weapon no amount of tactical genius could defeat. That quantity, when sustained at sufficient scale, achieved a quality all its own, that a system which valued the replacement of material over the preservation of individual machines could, paradoxically, save more lives by accepting the loss of more equipment. Every Sherman that burned in Normandy made possible the Sherman that reached the Rhine. Every crew that died brought knowledge that saved the crews behind them. This was not the efficient brutality of German engineering, it was something more profound and more terrible, the power of a system wealthy enough to learn from its failures because it could afford to fail. Oberleutnant Klaus Hartmann survived the war. He surrendered to American forces in the Harz Mountains in April 1945, his last Panther, destroyed not by enemy fire but by lack of fuel. In the decades after, he taught military history at a gymnasium in Bavaria. When students asked him about tank warfare, about the great Panzer victories and the technical superiority of German armor, he would pause. Then he would describe that night in the Ardennes, the sound of engines that never stopped, the realization that mathematics had defeated mythology. "We built beautiful tanks," he would say, "magnificent machines, each one a masterpiece, but the Americans build a system, and when a system fights a collection of masterpieces, the system wins. Not because it is better in any single moment, but because it is always there, always coming, always more. This is what we could never understand until it was too late. War is not won by the best tank. It is won by the tank that is still moving forward when all others have stopped. 50,000 Shermans. The number still seems impossible, but in the winter forests of Europe, in the mud of the Ardennes, in the rubble of German cities, that impossibility became the most certain thing in the world. Not a single perfect machine, but an endless tide of adequate ones. Not the triumph of genius, but the patient, inevitable victory of abundance. And in that abundance, the quiet proof that democracy, for all its apparent chaos and inefficiency, possessed a strength that autocracy could never replicate, the power to pour forth plenty from the factories of free men till the wells of tyranny ran dry and the mathematics of freedom wrote the final equation of the war.